2021 was a really strong year for uranium. The equities on our coverage were up about 110% on average. The spot price was up 40% over the year. That's one of its largest single year moves in years, and that was largely driven by financial players who were accelerating price discovery in the spot market, which is a relatively thinly traded market. The most notable of 2021 was the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust. We spoke of that on our interview back in September. And the purpose of Sprott was to come through and start an ATM program and purchase physical uranium, and they did exactly that. And that was at a quicker pace than I would say myself and many other industry participants may have expected.
Hi, it's ggoernert, Senior Investment Advisor at Canaccord Genuity Wealth Management and ggoernert Wealth Management. Now, welcome to the channel where we help you make sense of the financial world. Now, for 2022, really happy that we've got Kate Lachapelle, Canaccord Genuity Uranium Analyst, joining us today for her 2022 outlook. Morning, Katie. How are you?
Hey, Greg. I'm good. How are you?
Great. I'm so happy you can join us. We get such good response to the videos that you and I do together back in the summertime, and then was 2021 the turning point for uranium, and in September. Now we're in 2022. Now you've just published Uranium Market Outlook. Why don't you share a little bit of your views of where we're at?
Yeah, in terms of the market, it's probably easy to take just a quick look back at 2021 first. So 2021 was a really strong year for uranium. The equities on our coverage were up about 110% on average. The spot price was up 40% over the year. That's one of its largest single year moves in years, and that was largely driven by financial players who were accelerating price discovery in the spot market, which is a relatively thinly traded market. The most notable of 2021 was the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust. We spoke of that on our interview back in September. And the purpose of Sprott was to come through and start an ATM program and purchase physical uranium, and they did exactly that. And that was at a quicker pace than I would say myself and many other industry participants may have expected. And it was that quick pace of buying that pushed the spot price north of $50 a pound in September. So that was its highest level in 9 years. So what we've seen since then is the spot price has pulled back a little bit. It's around $43 a pound right now, but it's still sustainably above that level. At the same time, the supply situation hasn't really changed. Supply is still under significant pressure. 2021 production continued to be impacted by COVID-19. So we saw the Cigar Lake mine was still down during Q1 because Kazatoprom's operations were producing below guidance, and they continue to struggle with some supply chain issues there. So all in all, right now, I would say that the market still remains extremely tight. And overall, in terms of, I guess, our outlook for 2022, I would say that we're a bit cautious in the near term. That's more so driven by just significant macro uncertainty and what we're seeing in terms of broader market weakness, which is definitely hitting the speculative equities, uranium included. However, from a fundamental perspective, the argument to maintain exposure to uranium is super, super strong. We've seen the best fundamentals in years and a near decade. Demand for nuclear power has increased dramatically. A lot of this is driven by the global transition to clean energy. At the same time, as we said, primary mine supply is sitting near a 12-year low. Uranium prices have recovered, but they're not yet at a level that is sustainable enough to restart idled production, and we haven't seen any development projects push forward. So I would say our outlook for 2022 and onwards is we still think the cycle still has a long way to go. Pricing's not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, and that's such a good point, because even though we've had the rise in the price of the spot market, we're still not at a point where it's at a sustainable point for reactivation of a lot of these mines. Demand picture from your point of view is still getting better, I think. Now, support for nuclear power, it still continues to increase. Why don't we talk a little bit more, because I want to talk, some of the demand drivers in particular on the nuclear side.
Yeah, so since we last spoke in September, we were positive on demand then, but I would say our demand picture has gotten even more positive. It's basically on a near monthly basis that we're seeing governments come out and reaffirm their support for nuclear power. If I look at announcements that have come just in September of last year, we've seen China come out recently, and they announced that they were going to build 150 new nuclear reactors by 2035. For context, that's more reactors than have been built in the world in the past 35 years. So that's a
Wow.
significant amount of demand. And China was already a big proponent of nuclear builds going forward. We've also seen a more constructive view around North American as well as European demand. So if we look at Europe, the European Union recently classified nuclear as green in its sustainable taxonomy draft. That was confirmed just yesterday. We've also seen financial support to keep reactors online in the US. Even if we look at a country such as Japan, who obviously had the tragic Fukushima accident, the new prime minister of Japan is very supportive of restarting the reactors that they've taken online. He just reconfirmed his support recently. So all of these developments are net positive for the demand outlook. And one thing that I would say as well is this is conventional demand for nuclear reactors. This isn't even considering the demand that we've recently seen from financial players such as Sprott, which we would term as secondary demand. That was 40 million pounds in the market last year. So all in all, it's durable.
Yeah, you touched upon Sprott or the Sprott, Uranium Trust. They were a bit of the catalyst last year in the marketplace by buying up. Going forward this year, how do you expect them to be, impacting the marketplace this year?
Yeah, you're right. Sprott was really, I would say, the most impactful move in the market, especially in the fall of 2021. They did lose some steam in December, though. That was in line with broader market weakness as well. And I do think they're going to play a role in the 2022 market. I just think it's going to be probably more muted than it was last year. The Sprott Trust still has about 2.4 billion left on its ATM. They have a 3.5 billion dollar ATM in place. The real catalyst that we're looking out for in 2022 with respect to the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust is a listing on the New York Stock Exchange. So management expects to file for that listing any day now. They were originally targeting sometime in January, so imminent for sure. The timing of the actual completion of the U.S. listing is a little bit uncertain because it is a novel listing. We're assuming it's going to happen around mid-year, so it gives them about a 6-month timeline. The main takeaway here is that if they get this U.S. listing, it's probably going to bring in more investor inflows into the trust, and then they can increase the purchasing power again and increase the pace that they're purchasing uranium. As an overall thought on Sprott, and every single pound that Sprott purchases should be viewed as positive for the uranium thesis. The way that Sprott or the Sprott Trust is structured is that these pounds are sequestered from the market. They don't have a way to sell them back into the market. So this is real demand from Sprott in terms of them purchasing these pounds, at least the way that the Sprott Trust is currently structured.
Yeah, so I mean, and that's a good point because that if that's not going back into the market, that just supports the demand thesis. Now, in 2022, what are you thinking that the key drivers or catalysts are going to be going forward here?
Yeah, so I think we're going to see a shift. 2021 was very much about the spot market, very much about how financial players were impacting the spot market. I think what I'm looking for, at least in 2022, is a shift back towards the long-term market. We have seen this increase in spot market activity, but it's not the fundamental market. The majority of uranium is still bought and sold under long-term contracts. And if we take a look at past cycles, an increase in long-term contracting has always been the leading indicator of higher prices. And I would say that we're very optimistic on it this year. Last year, we already saw evidence of increasing activity. So total contracted volumes last year were 36% higher than they were in 2020. We've started to see a growing number of RFPs on the market. We've started to see increasing off-market activity. If we just take a look at activity last year, U.S. utilities actually posted their highest buying level since 2008. At the same time, non-U.S. utilities weren't that active in the long-term market, but I don't really think that's a bad thing because what that means is utilities such as the large Chinese utilities aren't active yet, and they're going to be a huge driver of demand going forward. So they're going to have to come to market at some point, and that's just going to put further upward pressure on prices. The most important, I guess, indicator that I got from 2021 with respect to long-term contracting is, one, we saw an increase in long-term contracting, but two, these contracts were happening at higher price levels. So the term price was up 23% in 2021. That's its largest single year gain since 2007. So throughout 2022, that's definitely the biggest thing we'll be looking out for is a further increase in activity.
Yeah, so now, on the long-term contracts, what do you think the long-term sustainable price of those contracts is going to look like?
Yeah, I would say it has to be north of $50 a pound for the restart projects. I think that'll be the first leg up. So think MacArthur River, mines such as Langer Heinrich. I think it's telling that Cameco hasn't made a restart decision on MacArthur River yet. And yet we've seen a sustainable price north of $40 a pound in spot and now term. And they've been signing long-term contracts over the course of 2021. So I think 50 is sort of the first hurdle. And then I think you're going to need north of $60, $65 a pound, even $70 a pound long-term. And that's because when we look at supply and demand, there needs to be additional new mine supply, greenfield projects that need to come online to meet the current supply deficit we're in. These projects, while some of them are great on paper and from an economic standpoint, they have significant upfront capex to cover. They have hurdles such as permitting. They need a higher price level to make sure they're certain when they do make those big capital investments going forward. So I still think we've got a leg up from here.
Yeah, I mean, this still looks like there's a lot of upside just looking at those target prices. Now, the other part of it is there's some significant geopolitical concerns out there. We saw a bump up in the market just because we had some unrest in Kazakhstan. How does that potentially affect the overall supply situation in the markets?
Yeah, so Kazakhstan represents around 43% of uranium supply. So uranium supply is really, really concentrated. And what we saw in early January was a series of violent protests that broke out across Kazakhstan in a response to a doubling of LPG prices, which is used to fuel a lot of cars in Kazakhstan. What happened there was protests broke out. The government was essentially dismissed. They put in a 2-week state of emergency. It enacted an internet blackout. From our perspective on the uranium side, we haven't seen this sort of unrest in Kazakhstan in years, really. So while it didn't necessarily impact uranium production, because Atoprom came out and said that the operations continued to go forward, I think it increased the political risk profile of Kazakhstan. And I think in the eyes of utilities who are signing large, significant long-term contracts, this could lead them to further consider diversification of supply going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's the other part. When you have such a tight supply area and such limited amounts of where it gets produced, it doesn't take much. We're not even talking about the fundamental demand that you were discussing earlier. So looking forward to 2022, yeah, with the markets probably a little bit unsettled the first part of the year, but I still think the long term outlook for uranium is. There's no still, we talked about Paris Agreement last time. We talked about, now the Europeans, declaring uranium is green. I just don't see any way around this. If you're going to even try to attempt to meet any of your targets, how you could avoid nuclear.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. The fundamentals are extremely, extremely strong. And despite the volatility, they continue to get better. So we're very positive. We're very positive on uranium going forward.
Well, hey, great seeing you again. Katie Lachapelle, Canaccord Genuity, Uranium Analyst. Bye, Katie.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks for watching. If you want to see more content like that, please consider subscribing or join me on my website, ggoernert.com. That's ggoernert.com. Look forward to seeing you there.